And we're back. Hello, welcome back, everybody, to FilmograFeed. We've been gone for a little bit. Life's been busy for me. It's been mostly my fault, but we're back talking Sorkin, and we're talking Moneyball, and we have our first FilmograFeed guest. We wanted someone who actually
first of all, that's Caleb Open.
And that is Caleb Koho.
And welcome back to Filmography, a show where we break down people's filmographies bit by bit by bit. When it could be a writer, a director, a combination, or whatever. No, we're not just blank check Junior. That's all we do. But yeah, we have ourselves our first guest, like Boat said, and he's gonna hate every minute of this. Hi, Cody. How you doing?
Hello. I'm here. I'm here to talk about baseball. Like, I've actually, I don't know how many views you guys get, but I have actually watched more than I would like to admit on my call, but I watched the whole Town episode. Town was a good time. Heard Bowman compare John Hamm's dick and stuff. It was really weird, but overall, it was. You should compare it to Dollar, the scene about the dollar. It's in there. Go watch it. You said it on my stuff. But no, it's gonna be fun. I think it's gonna be interesting. Moneyball, good choice of movie.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
I was gonna say what I think before we start. What is your relationship to the movie Moneyball? When did you first watch it? How did you come to it? What's your deal with Moneyball?
Moneyball came late, I would say, to when I actually watched it. Like, came out 2011. I probably didn't watch it until like 2014. Around that time frame, I knew more about the 2002 Oakland A's from baseball versus this time frame. It was right around when the Red Sox won the World Series, so I was heavily involved in baseball, and that's the stuff that this movie I can never I love it a lot. It's like one of my top 100, but it still irks me because there's stuff that they just don't talk about in the film that is heavily involved in their 20-win season, that they just believe that just because they got Scott Hatterberg play first base and Jason's brother Jeremy Giambi to play, that they're like this all eater of worlds, and there's more to it than that. So.
And that's why we got you, because we'll go bit by bit and ask you for those information, because we'll just cards on the table. Boat doesn't really know what a baseball is, and I can fake it. So that's essentially where we go with baseball. For at least for me, Moneyball is really fun because I understand the general concepts of the sport, and I like the behind the scenes stuff. Whereas with you, Boat, you like the behind the scenes stuff, and there's no baseball in sight, and that makes you happy, correct?
Exactly. Weirdly enough, I was thinking about it. I think Moneyball was my first Sorkin movie. I think I saw this before I saw The Social Network. I think it's because my parents were okay with me watching this one a little bit younger, closer to around the time it came out, probably. I didn't see it in theaters, I don't think, but or closer to around the time it came out. So before I saw Social Network. So but this is one that's always grown on me, and I like it more and more each time I watch it. Yeah, love Moneyball because it's it's not a whole lot of the actual sport. It's the behind the scenes of the sport. But yeah,
I was going to say, speaking of the behind the scenes, it's time to go behind the scenes of Moneyball. And how was this made? With what we like to call context. So Aaron Sorkin has won an Academy Award, everybody. He wins for The Social Network, and everyone goes, this guy needs to write everything. So at the same time, he is developing two films, one about tech billionaire Steve Jobs, and one that has already been written called Moneyball. So in 2004, Sony buys the book Moneyball, written by Michael Lewis, and hires Stan Shervin to write the screenplay. If you don't know who Stan Shervin is, that makes sense. He's only written two other published films, and they would be Space Warriors and 2020's Clifford the Big Red Dog. So he writes the first draft of Moneyball. The film, as far as we know, is a lot, basically word for word, the book with dramatized into scenes. And I think that's crazy. And then it takes them 4 years to get Brad Pitt to star and produce. It's one of the first movies he agrees to produce. And in doing so, they get Steven Zalian to come in and write. And I think Boat and I can agree that is a huge upgrade at writer to go from Stan Sherman to the guy who wrote Schindler's List and The Irishman.
And also wrote and directed Searching for Bobby Fischer, which is a really underrated movie.
He also wrote and directed A Civil Action, and then his directing career ends when he remakes All the King's Men.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the end of him. And he never directed again. But they get David Frankel to direct. If you don't know who David Frankel is, he is the director of The Devil Wears Prada and Marley and Me. So he is the first person hired to direct Moneyball. He and Pitt met during the Golden Globes, the 66th Golden Globes in 2008, which is the year of the writer's strike. So I'm pretty sure they were able to just talk to each other with nothing else happening on stage. It was almost just like a meeting room. Actually, that's probably the event of the Golden Globes. And Frankel would leave the movie by February 2009, and his replacement was one Steven Soderbergh. Steven Soderbergh is brought in to take over directing duties. He confirms involvement, and he says it'd be really fun to make something visually interesting and funny involving baseball. He wanted to make it a lot more of a straight comedy. And his original idea was to cast Dimitri Martin, who is a comedian, actor, writer. He is most well known for playing Ice Bear in Cartoon Network's We Bare Bears. No idea who this man is, to be totally honest.
He's like the sketchpad guy. His like whole bit is he'll like show up on like Conan and stuff and be like, "Here's my large pad, and these are some thoughts" or something. That's like his bit. That's all I know about him.
He is cast to play Paul D. Podesta, who was the front office assistant for the Oakland A's. That is the basis for one Peter Brandt, the real life Peter Brandt. And then Scott Hatterberg and David Justice were cast to play themselves in Soderbergh's version, which I think is crazy. I don't know who these people are. This is where I'm going to ask Cody. Scott Hatterberg, could he be himself in a movie? He's shaking his head no.
He could barely be a first baseman, so no.
That's very fair. They also would have had interview segments with players Darryl Strawberry, Lenny Dykstra, and others interstitched in the middle. And Soderbergh, in the summer of 2009, had gotten permission to film at the Oakland Coliseum. Art Howe was cast to play himself as well. So this is just a half documentary, half movie. It's like American Animals. 5 days before it's filmed, it's put into limited turnaround, saying that last-minute script revisions by Soderbergh were too many baseball details. They didn't think it was going to be easy to watch. They also felt it was too arty for a $58 million budget that they'd given him. And Soderbergh was like, yeah, I'm done. I quit. So he's like, I'm good. I'm out. And then in the winter 2009, Bennett Miller is hired, and he comes on, and he's the guy who ends up eventually finishing out directing duties on the film, with Jonah Hill being chosen by Bennett Miller to replace Martin as D. Podesta. However, they announced that D. Podesta had asked for his name not to be used. He personally asked them, he said, "Don't use my name. This is not who I am. The character is no longer me. So I want my name changed." The person who then is brought on to write and changes the name to Peter Brand is Aaron Sorkin, who is hired in the winter of 2010 in the fall of 2010, about the time that The Social Network comes out, prior to him winning an Oscar, to make this movie. Scott Rudin is brought on board to produce the film as well, because he is notorious for, if he likes someone and he wins an Oscar with them, he rides that to the end of time and they belong to him. And that is why he's a creep. And we will not mention Scott Rudin anymore this series. It's not true. He'll be back. I'll let you guys talk real quick. Any thoughts on anything I've said so far? I don't know if I have more, but
yeah. I mean, I think like I'm glad this wasn't the 15-17 to Paris of baseball. I'm very happy about that. I think Soderbergh would have been a really interesting choice because he's a very visual director. I'm not sure how well it would have worked. Did anybody see High Flying Bird? I feel like that would be
I did.
Was it good?
It's okay. I think High Flying Bird is different because it's like about a sports agent during a lockout. So it's kind of like it's not really comparable in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of minutia about basketball in it that, like, if you didn't know basketball, you'd be a little confused.
Fair.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't cast real people. I don't understand the interviews with like Darryl Strawberry and other players around the time. I think that would have just been dumb. Sounds like a little weird, like American Animals, like kind of vibe before it was like real life, and here's this fake. Hatterberg, I was like, good lord, like that would have been a choice. Like I don't know, like I'm glad this movie could have been really bad, and so the actual good movie it was. That's kind of weird, but no.
Yeah, no. So Sorkin actually does not agree to do it unless Steven Zaillian gives his blessing because he respects Zaillian a lot. And Zaillian's like, yeah, all right, that's fine. So Zaillian does his own rewrite, Sorkin does his own rewrite, and Bennett Miller sort of puts the two together. Apparently they used a lot more of Sorkin's than Zaillian's, but they did a lot of work together. Then the cinematographer that they chose, Adam Kimmel. I don't really know anything about Adam Kimmel except that he got fired because he was investigated for sexual assault, and he's replaced by recent Academy Award winner at the time, Wally Pfister, known for being Nolan's boy, Inception, The Dark Knight, all those movies. That is him. So he comes on to shoot Moneyball. In the May of that year, they get Philip Seymour Hoffman and Robin Wright. They also then get Chris Pratt, Catherine Morris, Stephen Bishop, but Morris's scenes were cut. Pratt dropped 30 pounds to get the role of Hatterberg. And then they were off to the races. Filming at a reduced budget of $47 million because Brad Pitt agreed to take a pay cut to get it made. And they filmed at Blair Field for 8 days and Dodger Stadium and just redressed it because Oakland was like, nah, no Soderbergh, fuck you. It was like, well, weird that they wanted Soderbergh that much. And then they got Michael Dana, and they get all sorts of the people that you know from then in terms of all the different minor players in the story in terms of music and stuff like that. So, yeah, Casey Bean in the film does a cover of the Australian song "The Show," which they did not get permission to do, and it was almost a lawsuit. And then Brad Pitt talked to them and made it okay. That's all I got so far until we get to the aftermath of all of it. But yeah, that's essentially the story of how they put baseball on the big screen with Brad Pitt.
Yeah. So I think we're good. Unless Cody, you have any thoughts on the rest of the aftermath?
No. I have stuff to talk about, like the actual real story behind Moneyball, but other than that, like the lead up, no, I think we're good.
Yeah. Then I think we can just kind of jump into the movie itself. The movie kind of sets us up with, the Oakland A's, Billy Beane, general manager of them, and how they're losing 3 big players to the Yankees. And that's kind of the setup for the movie. And we're being gutted by the Yankees. And we get kind of, I think the first like scene that really hooks you, the scene that really like grabs your attention is, and if you want to talk about anything I'm skipping over, that's fine, but I think this is a real first scene where we actually have something to really talk about, is Billy Beane and all the other scouts, and the scouts, start talking about, who they're getting to replace, and Billy Beane eventually just gets so frustrated, and he delivers one of my favorite lines ever, which is, you have rich teams, you have poor teams, you have 50 feet of crap, and you have us. You keep talking the same good body nonsense like we're selling jeans, like we're looking for Fabio. It's great. It's classic Sorkin dialogue. And it's just kind of a great setup to where Billy Bean's character is at and his frustration with the scouting system. Koho, Cody, thoughts?
I love sort of Brad Pitt's introduction in this, where he's like sitting out in the stands and listening to it, and his whole like, you can leave it on, it's fine, and then just like being so upset that the reason they lost is because they had this great player and they can't afford to compete. It's essentially like there's no point in doing this when it's like this is a money game and we're not rich enough to play. I think like his frustrations are so valid in that moment. He does such a good job of being like, when Brad Pitt's mad, it's not showy mad. It's actually, I'm terrified to watch you be mad, because he looks calm and then he like will throw something and you're like, whoa, that's serious. So I think Pitt's performance in this movie is pitch perfect. He's fantastic.
Yeah, like the story of them losing, like they set it up really well. Like this team has absolutely nothing. This next season that they're completely just gutted. It's not technically true. Like, so it's a great speech, don't get me wrong. But Isringhausen goes to the Cardinals. Damon goes to the Red Sox. Giambi goes to the Yankees. 3 separate teams. They offer 3 different players, but they lose all 3 in free agency, which Giambi, coming off the previous season, is having a flippin' psychopath season, thanks to steroids. No shock to that now, but he's having a great season. They sign him for a whole crap ton of money, and they lose him. So when he's basically in the scout, but the whole thing is the Oakland A's have always been about this. Before Moneyball was a thing, they've always played Moneyball. They don't spend. They just recycle good draft picks, get players up, and move on. So he's sitting there was like, I've lost this many power crap, and you're talking about this guy or this guy. It's not replacing who we have. We're in the bottom. So it's a really great scene. It's just not as dire as Billy describes it in the scene, because you lost a closing pitcher, you lost a center fielder, you lost a first baseman. The rest of your team is still really good, but they don't mention any of that. But that's the interesting side of Moneyball that I find fascinating, because they acted like they were dead in the water. They're really not at this point, if you actually look at their lineup. But that speech is all-timer, just an all-timer.
That's fair. Yeah, then I think we can kind of skip ahead to the introduction of Peter Brand, which I love this moment where, Bean goes to the Cleveland Indians and, starts trying to make a deal. And there's a player like he might get, and he sees this one kid whisper into somebody's ear, and it stops the deal in its tracks. And Billy's like, who are you? Why do you like him? And, Peter Brand doesn't really give him too much of an answer. And we reveal that it's his first job anywhere, not just in baseball. And then we get the greeting at the parking lot, where we kind of get the whole fundamental philosophy of the movie, which is the Moneyball idea of the scouts have it wrong. You're not trying to buy players, you're trying to buy runs. And I think that's a great scene. I think Jonah Hill, so good in this movie. I think this is like, for an actor who's typically so like showy, and he's great, he's very funny, but very over-the-top actor, to give this very subtle and fully realized performance is so impressive, in my opinion.
Definitely. It's very different than anything else he had done up to that point. And I remember that was just like, when this came out, there was this whole ordeal with Jonah Hill, where it was like, everyone was like, oh, this comedy guy can actually really act. And it was kind of very surprising. And now we kind of view Jonah Hill as that guy. And now we don't even view him as that anymore. He just doesn't do a lot anymore. But like, I remember just how surprising it was for Jonah Hill to give something like this, like where everyone's like, he's the super bad guy. He's the babysitter. Like he does all these shitty studio comedies or really good studio comedies, but like he's the funny guy. Get Him to the Greek was like the year before. And it's like he comes out and does this. I think he contrasts Pitt super well. Where like Pitt has the confidence that Hill lacks, but Hill has the exact formula for what Pitt needs. I think those two play off each other super well and help each other in a lot of ways too.
No, I fully agree. Jonah Hill is like the standout. Like, I think it's kind of those performances that he comes out with, and you're like, "Holy crap!" Like, that's not supposed to come out of you. Like, you're supposed to be the dick joke comedy guy. Like, and he's actually like doing actual, like, real, like, serious moments. Like, he's playing so subdued, which is not Hill at all in any of his other stuff. It's like he's the raunchy teen in Superbad. He's in The Sitter. Like, he's in Get Him in the Greek. He's in these like out loud funny, and he's got to be the one not cracking jokes. Like, arguably, like Billy Bean or Brad Pitt's the funnier one in the entire movie, and he doesn't have it. His the way he acts and the comedy that he gives is like awkward comedy. Like, he's like his like when he pulls down when he's excited with the deal, like when he has to like let go the player, like he has these moments that are just really just situational, but not the butt of the joke, which is up to that point was super surprising.
Yeah, I agree. Cody, I want to get your perspective a little bit because we touched on kind of the philosophy. Is that philosophy that Peter Brand kind of sets up in that scene, is it mostly BS? Like, what? I want your take on that.
So, I mean, they changed the way baseball kind of looks, and it didn't work at the time, but it works now more, where it's prospect heavy. It's try to get these young people developed, like classic, like outside baseball, like in 2020, the Red Sox, my team, won the World Series in 2018. We blew up our system basically in 2020, trading like revolutionary players for our team, but we didn't have anybody in the prospect hall. Like, our prospects were terrible. So the future was not looking bright. We're just going to keep spinning, keep spinning. So we've kind of went down to a lower. We still spin a lot, but we're lower because the game has kind of changed. So I would say Billy Bean and like Peter Brand were just before their time, like, because baseball's come around to what they believed in a little bit more. It's still a lot of people buying a lot heavier and spending a lot of money, but like, he's not wrong. Like, at the time, he's like, you're trying to replace us, but you're only going to replace us with max money and max contracts. And the only way to replace it is these people are not looking at these players because these are not good players in their eyes because they don't have flashy names, but they're good if you look at everything that they do. So it was like a smart strategy. Like, hey, I only have, because like, to put it in context, this is kind of like what Koho did at the start of the show. Jason Isringhausen signed 4 years, $27 million. That's $6 million a year. The Oakland A's could have afforded $6 million a year. They refused to pay the money because Isringhausen wanted to go close to home. Like, he lived closer to St. Louis, so that's what he wanted. Jason Giambi signed a stupid contract. So did Damon. They even say in the movie the Red Sox overpaid for Damon. Like, but Damon carried with him defense, hitting. But there's a guy that's less known, probably had an injury here or there, less money, can be that Damon for you. And that's where you're having to look and find different things. And that's why like baseball's kind of switched to nowadays, where there's more analytical guys. Like, there's people from Harvard and Yale and stuff running these front offices for baseball. Never touched a diamond, never put a glove on, never don't even know what a bat looks like. But they're running the show because they can look at numbers and be like, that's the guy to go grab. And that's what they're doing. So it's kind of baseball's. Peter Brand was the godfather of what baseball is now, and what, like, he would be a GM of a thing. Like, I don't know if Peter Brand's still around. Like, I haven't like looked him up because I think he's a believable. I think he's a real person. But like, they're talking about like Kevin Youkilis is like the guy they're talking about, the king of walks at the end of the movie. Like, the Red Sox traded, like, got him because like, that's one of those secrets about him. So yeah, he did something crazy that you just never thought was possible. But
yeah,
I'm currently looking up Paul of DePodesta, who is Peter Brand, and what he's currently
look, American football
doing.
looks like.
But he worked with the Dodgers for a very long time. It looks like, with the Padres, with the Mets. And then he was the chief strategy officer for the Cleveland Browns in the time where they actually were pretty good. So He was part of the Deshaun Watson trade, which is really funny because that's going to ruin quarterback contracts for the next 7 years in football.
And
almost cost the Ravens. It almost cost the Ravens Lamar Jackson.
Crazy that he did that. He practiced Moneyball, but he gave the most guaranteed money ever to a quarterback ever.
5 years, $230 million guaranteed is nuts.
Yeah, but never mind. You tell me when I can bring up the actual facts about Moneyball. The actual facts of the team. That's not what we see.
I think probably the best time to do it is maybe towards the end once we talk about like the reaction from the principals. I know that the principals had a lot of issues with the movie itself. So I think that'll probably be the best time to bring that up. Anyway, I kind of like it when we just kind of break it down element by element. So let's now kind of just go towards the actual, gathering of the players. And comes in. I love the scene where you've got Peter Brand first in with the scouts, and Billy Beane is just like, "This is what we're doing." I like these guys, and like, because he gets on base. Love that bit, and then we get them, gathering up the players. I love the pitch to Hatterberg.
I love, before we get to that point, I love in that meeting where afterwards where he's like, no offense, but you're listening to, I don't know, some kid over a guaranteed scout here with like 30 years of baseball expertise and experience. And he's like, yeah, but listen to the kid. Is pretty great. It's just like, we've been losing a long time with your baseball expertise, so I'm gonna take a shot with the kid. And I also love when he like pulls him in the hallway and he's like cursing him out. He's like, you're just pissed because some guy got it wrong with you years ago. He's like, I'm not gonna fire you. And he goes, fuck you. And he goes, nah, I will. I think that's my favorite moment with Billy.
When he walks to that guy, goes, you're the new head scout. Enjoy. And like walks by, like the guy is just like,
you ever play ball before? I played b-ball. You're the new head scout.
Because that's crazy. Like at that time frame, that's how people like projected scouts. Like you see it all the time, but like these guys sat in a room and said these guys can't hit or these guys can't do this because of body frame or how they swing or everything. Like the scout of baseball kind of ruined baseball because catching a prospect, believing that they can hit and be something is like hitting the lottery at times. They show in like young, but when you get to the major leagues, it's something, and they're just discrediting all this stuff because what Peter was bringing up is facts. Like this is on base percentage, this is walk rate, this is all these things that you can actually look in a game and see, and they're like, nope, he can't do it because of this. No, like what are you talking about? So I mean, even though scouts were right on some of those guys, like Jeremy Giambi, like clearly, he ends up getting rid of him because he clearly can't hit. He's crazy. But it's true. The scouts were fitting their own ways and just couldn't see the other way. So a lot of them got moved out because adaptive times are changed. But Oakland A's started that first mentality, which was crazy. But yeah, that line just, you're the new head scout. Enjoy. Like, it's just like, and it's true because Billy knew more than anybody. Billy was a top prospect. Billy thought he was going to be the next, great player in baseball, and turns out he couldn't make it. So he has a negative thing towards scouts, and you can see it throughout the movie, which they play really well, I believe.
Brad Pitt is somebody who I usually describe as an actor as like a character actor stuck in a leading man's body. I love it when he does like the character actor work, like your Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's, your 12 Monkeys, your Inglourious Bastards, your weirder performances, like not the type of performances you necessarily expect from Brad Pitt. I think this is Brad Pitt's best movie star performance. When he's playing like a real, like just movie star, like leading man role. And I think he kills it. Like, I think that's the best standard Pitt performance.
He has something that I don't know a lot of actors do, but once it starts, I'm hooked. Just by him. Like, I don't need the movie to... Like, I wouldn't say, like, I seek out Brad Pitt movies, but I really should. Because the more I watch it, like, I always put this like I think he's such a crucial part in Ocean's 11 for me, just because like his charm and delivery of lines hooks me in. Like that's a character. He's like a relatable. He's a relatable, sexy guy, which is weird to say. Like he's attractive by a lot of standards, but the viewpoint is like he hooks you in because he's relatable. Like he plays off like a person like you could be best friends with in any like movie that he's really in, and it finds that vibe. Like a longer movie like The Assassination of Jesse James with the Cow Runner 4, it's a long movie, but he brings you in where you're like, I'm comfortable to be with this however long this journey is. Like, and it's kind of a crazy viewpoint that I've never realized, but the more I watch her, Troy, another movie that's not great. Sorry, Scott Harvey. It's not great, but like I'm enjoying the entire time because I am in the world with Brad Pitt. He's like like him, Tom Cruise, but he's like a movie star that just like carries the movie with him. It like raises the score because he's in it versus out. So I think him playing Billy Bean, I think you honestly you cast somebody else on as Billy Bean in this movie. I don't know if this movie works as well because his line delivery I think is crucial throughout everything. Like you could have like an angrier actor say there's 50 feet of crap in this, and just like I don't give a shit about baseball, but he's relatable. I think he's just a relatable guy. It seems like. My takes.
No, I agree.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. But moving on to I actually do kind of want a little bit of perspective, Cody, on Scott Hatterberg, Chris Pratt, a very young Chris Pratt at this point. He had done I think 2 seasons of Parks and Rec.
What's Your Number with his wife Anna Faris?
Yeah, he wasn't in it at that point. To be fair, he's in that movie for like one scene. He is not.
He's not in it a lot. No. But like that's like his career at this point is being the shitty best friend in Wanted, and then that's kind of it. Like he's Wanted. What's Your Number? A bunch of weird indie things he's involved in that aren't like indie comedies that are bad, and 2 seasons of Parks and Rec, and then he gets Moneyball.
Yeah. But essentially they're training someone who's never played first base before to play first base. Cody, was that a terrible idea?
No, it's honestly really common for now a catcher to transition to first after their knees go out. Like catching is very demanding on their body, so they move into first base. Joe Mauer, like a famous Twin, he was on his, played catcher for a really long time. He ended his career as a first baseman. When they have a substitution, sometimes they'll put it. So Scott Hatterberg, the problem was his arm was destroyed, so he couldn't return the ball basically back. But this kind of like boosted his career because up to that point he was with the Red Sox all the way up until 2002. Never made over 420 like plate appearances. Never started in over 113 games. Like never was that guy. And then he went to Oakland, 136, 147, 152, 134, 141. Like he found it and just continued because catching's a demanding sport, and he was able to make first base work. Again, these are baseball players. They're skilled players. They can if he can catch a ball at 97, the reversal he should be able to. But it's an incredible switch if he's never done it before. But I guess they don't really tell you like Little League and stuff like that. You played everything for a while leading up to the pros. Like you needed a first baseman. They didn't have everybody on the team. You play first base. Like that you just haven't played it since college most of the time. Like you haven't worked in the minor league systems, but they've taken catchers and put them as pitchers before. Like it's crazy. Like you'll start one way and move to another if they see that you have something they can teach you. So crazy at the time, more common now, way more common now. Mm-hmm. But he is also not a great player. Like leading up to that, like they saw a diamond in the rough. It was wild. Like I don't know. Like looking to it, if you just sent me this screenshot of this guy's career before Billy Bean said that's my guy, I would have been like, hell no, what? Worked out. Magic.
That's fair. I'm just kind of take a big chunk here, and then any individual pieces of the big chunk you want to discuss, you're welcome to discuss. But the Oakland A's, they start winning. or they don't start winning yet. They get formed together, and they're not doing great. Arguably because Art Howe isn't playing them the way he's supposed to be playing them, and that creates a little bit of tension. And Billy Beane essentially trades people over so that Art Howe has to start. Hatterberg has to play Hatterberg because that's how it needs to work for the thing. And then things start actually going well for them, but Howe's the one getting most of the credit. But then we start to get what I really love, which is Billy Beane actually starts like working with the players and actually talking to them and giving them advice, almost not really as a GM, but as a coach. And I think that's a really great montage that I love.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what else. I mean, you kind of nailed that. I don't know. I don't really have a lot of thoughts on this giant chunk of the movie, to be honest with you.
Well, he trades Carlos Pena, right? That's that he trades the first baseman from him, which, I mean, a wild deal. All right, so this player, not a great average hitter, which was the problem, I think, in that situation. But this guy goes on to have he's an MVP chase conversations, hitting 30 home runs, driving in 100 RBIs. 2007, he hit 46 home runs and 121 RBIs, and they just trade him away because he wants Hatterberg to start, which I think is wild. But Billy's onto something because over the time he traded him in 2002, he was only at 7 home runs, 16 RBIs. He batted .218. He was down. He went to Detroit. He was up average. He was up at his average went up all the way, and that's what just was crazy. He gave up on a great prospect at the time, which some players look back and be like, "Dude, Hatterberg was only around for 3 more years. You could have had this guy for the next 12." But it is what it is. But yeah, it's a wild scene. I love the scene because he's because when he goes to he's "You're starting Hatterberg." "No, I'm not. Just traded him." He's gone. I removed him from the system. You have to start who I want now, which is wild. Head coaches back then, especially Art Howe, which is a very revered coach at that time, pissed. You don't tug on Superman's cape. You don't mess with respected coaches in the thing. And he's like, "Fuck you. I have a formula. I need you to play it. If you're not going to play it, here it is." And that's a lot how front offices work now, where they are telling the manager of who to start and who to play. A lot of people get lineup sheets from the upstairs versus them making the group decision anymore because they know the formula, which is nuts to me. You don't have baseball feel anymore. You basically just go with who they think. So, again, Billy Beane before his time, but he had to trade people. Is this? Are we talking about the same scene where he had? We're not the
Yeah.
Are we at the
trade deadline, or is this before?
No,
we're not. A little before.
You were talking about the right. You were talking about exactly
what I do want to do with this scene, though, is I just want to shout out Philip Seymour Hoffman, who doesn't get talked about enough for this performance. I think that he's really important, key to making Billy Beane work at all as a character. Because Art Howe's not necessarily an antagonist or even a bad guy, but Philip Seymour Hoffman does the perfect job of being "Listen, I'm an element you need to control, and you can't control me, and I'm a problem. I'm a problem for you because you're doing something that I just don't believe in." And to have that sort of in reality, Art Howe's not necessarily, like you said, wrong. He's not wrong in anything he's saying or believes in. But Philip Seymour Hoffman's also able in his performance to make you question if Art Howe knows what he's talking about or not, or if he's also part of the antiquated scout bullpen that he just dealt with. So Hoffman is a more famous version of all the people in the scouting room, but he also speaks with knowledge of what he's talking about, but just a little bit of smarm where you're I don't feel bad if you get cut. Or if they get rid of you. I think that's a really important needle for Hoffman to throw.
He's also not as chunky.
I just Googled him. Yeah, he's not as chunky at all.
There are 2 actors who I think are just perfect at reading Sorkin dialogue. And it's Bradley Whitford and it's Philip Seymour Hoffman. They are just like put Sorkin dialogue in their mouth, and it's just golden. We talked about PSH and Charlie Wilson's War, and PSH was just one of the great cinematic floor raisers. Like, he just elevated every single movie he was in. Like, you ever seen Along Came Polly? It's an awful movie. He is great in it. He is like having so much fun in a completely like terrible character, honestly. Like, nothing much, like just the best friend in the rom-com, and he just kills it. He's the only reason to watch that movie.
I mean, he also, after this, was like, after their successful season, he leaves the team. Which is crazy. Yeah,
where does he go?
Mets. He goes to the Mets for 2 seasons, and he has an awful time, and he quits managing after that. But yeah, they have a historic season, and he leaves, which I think is just because he was rubbed the wrong way the entire time.
That's fair. Then, I think we brought it up, but let's just skip to the trade deadlines, which I think
probably the best scene in the movie.
Is the scene of the movie. And which is so amazing to me because it is a scene that is in one room the entire time and essentially just revolves around 2 guys in a room and a series of phone calls. And it is so great because I feel like a lot of directors would be like, oh, this doesn't feel very cinematic. We need to show shots of the other GMs talking. Like Draft Day does that. Like Draft Day doesn't keep it with Sonny Weaver. It cuts to the other GMs all the time.
At the same time, we'll probably never cover Draft Day on the show unless we do Chadwick Boseman, which I will be pushing for at some point. But I think that Draft Day, that works for Draft Day because of the stylistic editing that I love with the bar cuts and how the different bars move and I don't know. That's
if you take a shot of every split screen shot in that movie, you'll be
drunk. You'll be drunk, but I think it's I like the editing of Draft Day a lot.
I go back and forth on it.
But I think that those are 2 different styles that work for 2 totally different tonal movies. But I also think that I prefer what Moneyball does to what Draft Day does. Where Draft Day, both halves of the conversation are kind of necessary and I get it. But with Moneyball, I think it's really impressive. And I do want to shout out Bennett Miller, who I think should have been nominated for Best Director for this. Really should have been. I think he does a great job with a lot of the decisions in this movie that are very much underrated decisions. With just how, like you said, he contains it to that one room, and these 2 guys that we are so invested in at this point, just doing their job super well, which is what Sorkin specializes in wholeheartedly. If you were to tell me, go through this movie and pinpoint the things that Sorkin wrote when Zalian wrote, I am guaranteeing you all the money in the world, the deadline is a Sorkin scene. Because he absolutely nails the idea of people who are really good at their jobs, doing their job really well, and that's why it's super fun to watch. So I think them ping-ponging off each other and Jonah Hill learning to do the job in that moment and how to fully execute the duties of a general manager super well. I think he just crushes it. I love this.
I mean, it's really interesting. I've always thought that so the NFL has a thing called Hard Knocks, and I've always thought the MLB needs to do this series. This is how Draft Day, trade deadline works in Major League Baseball. It is, everybody has up until this point, but the day of, phones start ringing, calls start being made, and trades just start flying. And I've always just believed that they need cameras in all 30 places and just watch the phones ring and the conversations that ensue, because it's very similar to what it would. Because I watched MLB Network and refresh my Twitter on Draft Day on trade deadline, and all of a sudden it's things are just flying. I was I can just imagine being a fly on the wall when these trades are coming through, going through. So I think it's a brilliant scene. They're calling, and he's no, what about this guy? No. Oh, hold on, I got this cooking. Give me a call back. Blah blah. And it's just they're flying, and it's just And this is also when he's I don't want to pay for my my soda anymore. Or is that earlier?
I don't want my players paying for soda anymore.
That's earlier?
That might be earlier, but
it might be. I'm pretty sure there's something in the deadline. I think the trade deadline, something like that, is put around in there, though, isn't it?
But overall,
sure.
I don't think so. But it's a fantastic. just where they're able to pick up the phone and be like, hold on 1 second, and they're able, and once they get who they want, and like the excitement is just like awesome to see from like Peter. So and then I think they capture that scene so well and do it justice. It's arguably one of the best scenes of the entire movie.
Yeah. And Koho brought up Bennett Miller. And this is the only movie of the three he's directed, or at least the three big ones he's directed, Capote, this, and Foxcatcher. This is the only one of his movies that doesn't look like it was shot in a dank basement. Like, this has light.
Again, that's because his regular cinematographer, Adam Kimmel, did not work on this. They had Wally Pfister, who I think is one of the best cinematographers of all time. And that's like, Pfister worked for a very short period of time, knocked it out of the park, everything he did. Did The Dark Knight Rises, which I think is a really great last outing for him, like on a shot perspective, and then just walked away and went into transition to directing, made a terrible film called Transcendence, and then disappeared. And I don't know where he is or what he's doing, but I'm sure he's getting residuals from The Dark Knight and Inception and living off those for life. This is like, I think this is a really underrated outing for him in his filmography, because I think he shoots everything really tight. Everything in this is really well done. And I think that's what's really stands Bennett Miller's movies visually apart, is this one from a visual standpoint and also a sound standpoint. I still believe this should have won Best Sound Mixing. Is like the music for Michael Dana as well. Everything feels urgent. This movie has an urgency visually and musically and like in the sound design that like I think none of his other movies have, which makes this one stand out.
Yeah. I agree. Like, this is a really technically well done movie without being a flashy movie. Is I think the thing. Like, it never feels in your face in terms of the stylistic elements. It's very good. And then this scene transitions into another scene I love, which is the firing scene. And those are great. And you get to back of Peter Brand firing the one guy, and he's very anxious about it. And he doesn't. You get the conversation between Bean and Brand. Would you rather, have a shot to the chest or a shot to the head, or 5 to the chest and bleed to death? It's like, are those my only two choices? And then you get Pitt firing Giambi also in that moment, or telling Giambi he's being traded. And those are great moments.
Right. And I think that the firing, I think the firing scenes is great. I think Jonah Hill then going and doing the firing is great. Where it's just that, like Cody said, that sort of bit of comedy you get out of the awkwardness of him having to do this, where you feel for him, but you also are like, oh, buddy. And then, like, just the reaction of the players where it's like, all right, then. And you're just like him ripping the Band-Aid off, watch them walk away, and him afterwards just being like, is like, I don't know. I think Jonah Hill plays that really well.
Yeah. Then you start to really get the streak going, and that's great. And again, I think unless there's kind of something I'm skipping over that y'all really want to talk about, then I think we can kind of transition towards the actual end of the movie with the final game. And Pitt, Bean still isn't in the audience, and finally he decides to turn around, and they start to lose. And I think that's like such an interesting thing of you have a character who has had these, this conviction that we kind of agree, oh yeah, he shouldn't really have that attitude. And then the second he gives up that attitude, things go wrong for him. And I think that's a really interesting thing to showcase in a movie. And I really like that. And I think that's really a really fascinating decision that was made within the movie. And I really like that. But I haven't really touched on the whole Robin Wright and daughter stuff, which is maybe because I think maybe the weakest element of the movie.
Well, it's also the beginning of the Aaron Sorkin "I'm a Dad" trilogy. When he was like becoming a dad, he has this, Steve Jobs and Molly's Game, which are all emotional crux of the movie, a father-daughter relationship. And I think that this is the weakest of those three when it comes to the father-daughter relationship. I think it's also the weakest element of the movie. I don't think it's bad. I just think like
game is fire.
Molly's game is fire. He kind of gets better at it with each outing. But like I think that like the stuff with the daughter in this is not bad. It's actually kind of touching. Like when they're in the music shop playing the guitar and he's like, "Can you sing for me?" And she sings the show. Like I like that. I don't think it's like I don't think you hate it. Okay, why do you hate it?
I hate that song. I hate that. It's one of the parts that always takes me out because I don't think she's that great of a singer. That may be mean to say, but I just
caught in the middle. Life is a game and love is a riddle. I don't know where to go.
I hate it.
I also do just want to point out in this bit.
Like, you don't want baseball scenes in your... I don't want just random song from daughter to, like... She could just say, "I love you, Dad." Like, that would be fine. You'll sing a song, and they repeat that song over and over.
I also think it's wild that her parents, who are barely in the movie, are Robin Wright and Spike Jonze. Like, what weird casting decisions for those two to just be in this movie for, like, 2 scenes, 3 scenes? It's kind of wild. But no, I love the scene where he goes back. Like I'm checking out our minor league team and seeing our prospects. It's like, you got to turn around now, and to come back to that game, and then what? Like I think that's
I think the shot too of like Hatterberg hitting the home run, because like that's a sports moment that like lives in like sports baseball. Like that shot is just beautiful. It didn't look like that, but the way they were slowing the hit and like. They were down and they were about to win this 20th game, which is just still crazy. Because when you think 20th, the feat of winning 20 games in a row in baseball is the equivalent almost to going undefeated in football. Like, less games, but it doesn't matter. Like, 5 different starters have to start 4 different times. And you have to walk away with a win that many times. With that many elements going right for you, nuts. And how they were able to pull that off, which is nuts to me. So.
That's a good point. And then I think we can kind of move on towards the end. Billy Beane gets the offer from the Boston Red Sox, turns it down.
God.
Okay, I'm curious as to why that reaction is, but you also get the great little moment between Peter Brand and Billy. You get the great line that I think is repeated multiple times. How can you not be romantic about baseball? Which I think is like the crux of the movie. You get the great little moment where Peter Brand talks about the guy like always walks and doesn't realize he's gotten a home run, and that's like such a funny scene. And then you get the daughter singing at the end. Which on the song, it's very early 2010s, late 2000s, like Jason Mraz style song.
Yes.
It has like that same, "Well, you done me so that
I think of every time.
It's like
put
that.
Put a fedora on and call it a day. Like, good God, kill me.
But yeah. So anyway, Cody, why was that your reaction?
So up until that point, the Red Sox hadn't won a World Series since 1918. And 102 win team for the Oakland Athletics. Then the very next year, with losing Giambi, Inzerhousing, and Damon, they won 103 games. So they best the record with them the year prior. And the Red Sox decide to offer him money. He turns it down to stay in Oakland. We hire Theo Epstein, and 2003 we go to the playoffs. The next year we win the World Series, and we break the 86 years. So that's just my moment of like, if we hire Billy Beane, because Billy Beane has yet to win a World Series. So if that's the case, I'm still without maybe a ring still to this day. So I think we made the right choice. I don't think Billy would have fit our front office. So even though he's a great, it just did not work for us. So thank God.
That's fair. So yeah, go ahead.
So the Moneyball comes out. It is immediately blasted by a couple of critics, David Haglund and Jonah Carey, who are baseball critics, not necessarily film critics, for excluding Tim Hudson, Mark Mulder, and Barry Zito, Eric Chavez, and Miguel Tejada from the movie, saying that they were discovered via traditional scouting methods and were key contributors to the success, and them not being in it is just like it's only showing the case for Moneyball and not for old school scouting. Art Howe trashed the film, saying it is very disappointing to know that you spent 7 years in an organization, gave it your heart and soul, helped them go to a postseason your last 3 years there, and win over 100 games your last 2. And the way your boss feels about you is this. He said that he was not contacted about his portrayal. Hatterberg also came to Howe's defense, saying Art Howe is a huge supporter of mine and never got the impression from him that I was not his first choice. And said that Bean and Howe had a very turbulent relationship. The San Francisco Chronicle made an entire article about the inaccuracies of the film, including Giambi and Bradford had already joined the team before the time period of the film, and that Giambi and Pena trades did not occur at the same time. The film is still used as an example for as Moneyball is a theory that could still work. They use it. They talk about the NFL and the NHL adapting methods of it as well with chief data officers. But anyway, the film comes out. It goes to TIFF on September 9th, 2011. It is released by Columbia Pictures. It makes $75 million at the U.S. box office. Told worldwide budget or gross of $110 million off a $50 million budget, so it made its money back and then some. Fun fact: it was second at the box office opening weekend with $19.5 million in 2,000 theaters, behind the 3D re-release of The Lion King. So that'll do it. In its second week, it only dropped 38%, grossing $12 million, which is one of the best second week holds in the history of box office. So it held pretty well. Widely loved. We love to go to Mr. Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert, a big fan of Aaron Sorkin. We say that with a bit of sarcasm. He loves some of them and hates some of them. But he gave this one 4 stars, praising the film for its intelligence and depth, specifically the screenplay and its terse, brainy dialogue. So this one is Ebert approved. Mixed reviews from Slant Magazine and others, but on the whole, it is widely regarded as being great. Moneyball went on to receive 6 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, Best Actor for Brad Pitt, Best Supporting Actor for Jonah Hill, Best Adapted Screenplay for Steven Zaillian, Aaron Sorkin, and Stan Shervin, Best Sound Mixing and Best Film Editing. It also received 4 nominations at the 69th Golden Globes for Picture Drama, Actor in a Drama, Supporting Actor for Hill, and Best Screenplay, which is part of the historic run of Aaron Sorkin at the Golden Globes, which I don't think we've talked about. He has literally been nominated for every movie he has ever written, with the exception of Malice. He has been nominated for a Golden Globe for everything he has ever written, ever, which is ridiculous, including a movie that Caleb Boatman really loved from the year 2021 that we'll talk about at the end of the series. But that is the critical success of Moneyball.
All right, Cody. So go ahead. This is your soapbox. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there's a measurement in baseball called WAR. It's wins above replacement. So if these players were out in your lineup, they are counted for this many more wins if they are in versus not. The 5 stars that they do not represent at all in the film are responsible for 30. They have the AL Cy Young Award, Barry Zito. They have the second runner-up Cy Young, Tim Hudson. They have the AL MVP, Miguel Tejada. They have their third starter, Mark Mulder. They have a third baseman named Eric Chavez. To put this into effect, Barry Zito 7.1, Tim Hudson 7.0, Tejada 5.7, Mulder 4.6, Hatterberg 3.3. So they reference these players. They don't have that overall. They have 4 pitchers on their staff that is upwards of 200 innings pitched, with a under 4 ERA, which is excellent. They're just not this poor nothing team that is described to win 20 games. They're great. They just don't have the money to spend because so in baseball, when you get a prospect, when they come to the major leagues, you have service time. So say if we ever did like teams in say, Kingsman, for example. Like, say the Kingsman or whatever faction in trivia. If Bowman gets called up to be playing an actual match in Melee, he has to play 6 years under the Oakland Athletics. 6 years. He can't sign with anybody else for 6 years of service time. Once he completes 6 years, he's able to sign wherever he'd like, whenever he'd like. But practically at that time frame, you're allowed to pay him what you want to pay him. So these great players can pay cheap because they don't have to pay you a lot because you hold them for 6 years. And then 7 years. That's why Oakland Athletics, if you trade a prospect, you get a good one. You have 6 years of control over that player. So Miguel Tejada, Barry Zito, Tim Hudson, Mark Mulder, Eric Chavez, you had these great stars. They just weren't able for free agency, like Jason Giambi. Jason Giambi came up in the system, was good, waited. Mark McGuire, great player, waited, was in the Oakland Athletic system, waited, signed with St. Louis. There's just they keep you for 6 years. Kansas City Royals are a lot similar on that team. So that's just the inaccuracies that drive me crazy because they're sitting there like, well, these lovable bunch of losers come together and win. No, they have the Cy Young, which is the best pitcher in baseball. The best hitter in baseball is on your team in the same season. You're going to be a good team. So it was a little inaccuracies, but again, there are still stuff that they talk about that is accurate. Like, these baseball fans are like, these trades happened at 2 different times. Shut up. Like, who cares? We're not talking about, like, that's the stuff that's annoying. Like, that, but to not include any of those players, what you mentioned in this movie, that doesn't make any sense. Because, like, it's out there. It's factual. So I don't know that decision. I don't know why that was a decision. Maybe it doesn't sell well when you have, like, all those, like, good players on your team. But overall, it doesn't ruin the movie for me. It just has those little inaccuracies that I'm just like, guys, your team was better than you said you were. So
I think at the end of the day, we can kind of start talking about just final thoughts and wrapping up the movie. I think at the end of the day, Sorkin prioritizes telling a good story over accuracy. You see it with The Social Network. You see it with Charlie Wilson's War. You even see it with Steve Jobs a little bit. He'd rather tell a good story than be accurate. And I agree with it. I think that this movie rules. I think that this is just an incredibly well-written film, well-acted, looks great, and just a really interesting sports story from a really cool angle. I think it's fantastic. Koho, final thoughts on the film?
I love Moneyball. I think this is one of the most entertaining scripts that Sorkin has ever put out. I think it just goes from beginning to end. It's just fantastic. Super entertaining. I think that even just the smaller parts, I think even Chris Pratt is like really good. Like, I like a lot of them in their little utilitarian roles. I feel like it's probably the least flashy thing Sorkin has ever written, and it works so well because of it. I don't want to say like I miss this era because we have one more left in this era before we get into this is Sorkin. I'm in control of my own destiny. But I do love things like the 3 we're talking about, where it's like a director can really shape that into the best version of it and take some of the Sorkinisms back a bit and get Sorkin sort of out of his own way. And then we get to talk about the trilogy of when Sorkin is in control. So we're getting to it. But I think this is a great one. I think this 3-film run he's about to be, like, we're in the middle of, is absolutely goated. And honestly, I think it's a 5-film run because I really love the next 2 after it as well, even though, like, as a director, people don't love him. I like his first 2 movies a lot as a director. So I feel like it's a great 5-film run.
I think it's a great 6-film run. I think it's a great 6-film run. Anyway.
Oh, well, the last thing we gotta do before we wrap this one up is we have to update our personal rankings.
Cody's picks.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I want Cody's opinions, and then you and I can do that.
I think it's funny because I know that. Are you guys going through all of it? Like, is the last movie he's okay?
Like next week will be Steve Jobs. To be clear. So
next week, week after that is Molly's Game. Week after that is
Bowman, you got some splaining to do.
We ended the series on beating the Ricardos, and I can't.
You got some splaining to do. Okay. With that being said, I love Moneyball a lot. Again, all the inaccuracies and stuff in it. I hate the song more than the inaccuracies not being in there, personally. That's how my opinions are. It's not my favorite overall where it ranks. Like, I love, the more I sit on it, Molly's Game, I think, is an actually, like, fantastic film that he does. And, like, that will be an exciting one to listen to when you guys do it, because I'm excited to hear that one. But Moneyball is just overall top notch, great inside baseball, great, shows the beauty and how like hard it is to play and win at baseball. So you ain't gonna get any complaints from me. I mean, Sorkin's dialogue makes baseball like come to life. So it's brilliant. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, now, to kind of wrap up our rankings for Koho and I. So top Social Network,
right?
Then Moneyball. Then I would go A Few Good Men. Then I would go The American President. Then I would go Charlie Wilson's War. Then I would go Malice.
And to update mine, which is slightly different, we would continue to fight about this weekly. 1 would be The Social Network, and 2 being Moneyball. My 3 would be The American President. My 4 would be A Few Good Men. My 5 would be Malice, and my 6 would be Charlie Wilson's War. I think Charlie Wilson's War is still his worst.
Thank you, Cody. Thank you.
American President over A Few Good Men?
They're both 4.5. I love The American President.
I mean, you can love it, but A Few Good Men's better. Like, what are we doing?
I think the second act of A Few Good Men's the one little knock in between.
What you said? The second half?
The second act, like the in between, like the beginning. Love it. The third act of the quarter, love it. The middle is not as much.
You don't like to eat Chinese food and talk about law?
No.
Well, I do.
So the non-Nicholson. I get it.
The non-Nicholson, yeah.
Anyway, that is wrapped up. Next week, we're talking about this little guy right here, Steve Jobs.
We get to talk about a movie that we adore, that was criminally under talked about, and now we have oversaturated the market on. It's going to be a good episode.
It'll be a fun time. Okay. Thank you so much to Cody for putting up with us. Really appreciate it. Thank you to Koho, as always. Thank you to everyone at home for watching. Thank you to the video store. We'll see you later.